Hi, I'm Pam and I'm here to talk about video games. I talk about a fair number of NES games that could be considered hidden gems, and I try to shed some light on them. But today, I'm talking about a game that I think should stay hidden and never put into a console. It's Adventures of Dino Riki. Adventures of Dino Riki was developed by Hudson Soft and released on NES in North America in 1989, 2.5 years after it was originally released in Japan. It's a vertically scrolling shooter, except you're walking instead of flying. It's kind of like Pocky and Rocky, except shitty. In this world, humans and dinosaurs exist at the same time, and as Riki, you need to shoot the ones you see, along with bats, skulls, and other monsters, while avoiding their attacks. You have a small arsenal of weapons to help you. You start by throwing stones, which is very inefficient. By picking up power fists, you can upgrade to throwing axes, boomerangs, and finally, the power of fire. Of course, if you ever get hit by an enemy projectile, you lose some of your power and drop down a weapon level, making everything much more challenging. You have 3 health to start, but can refill it with meat, or can increase your total health by picking up hearts. You can also get speed boost. The game starts out alright. The controls aren't the best and Riki feels a little sluggish, but it's playable. But then the game asks you to start jumping. I have no idea why overhead auto-scrolling platforming was added to this game, because it is terrible. Halfway through the first stage, the game changes from a mediocre shooter to some hellish version of Frogger. The jungle you've been traveling through turns into a lake, where you need to hop between lily pads, some of which disappear and reappear or move around. The problems with the platforming in this game are plentiful. How the platforms look on screen doesn't really correspond to where the safe zones are when you land on them. So many times, I very much look to be on solid ground only to find myself falling to my death. The jump itself is also not reliable. Sometimes pressing jump and forward would launch me much further than I expected, while at other times Riki would just do a little hop and fall into the water right in front of him. The speed boost can also really mess you up, changing the jumping physics at each different speed. But the worst part is that while the screen is auto-scrolling, Riki is automatically inching forward all the time. In later levels, some of the platforms you need to jump between are tiny. Even if you land where you need to, you then often need to tap backwards to keep yourself from walking right off the edge while you line yourself up for the next jump. But when you jump on a moving platform, you don't automatically move with it. I know some of these games are Nintendo hard, but this is bullshit. The second level, which takes place in a desert, thankfully ditches the platforming. However, it is full of disappearing and reappearing quicksand traps. Level 3 is in a swamp, and it's where the teeny tiny platforms make an appearance, along with fissures appearing in the ground as you approach. As the game goes on, there are more and more enemies coming at you, shooting projectiles, moving erratically, while your sluggish avatar tries to avoid them. Each level ends in a boss fight, and comparatively, they are much less challenging than the rest of the game. They just move back and forth shooting at you and are pretty easy, though I did find a couple of them, like the giant cobra, took a very long time to kill. The final level takes the 3 environments you've already seen and places many, very challenging versions of them back to back. That means there's really only 3 environments in the entire game, plus the boss fight arena. I feel like Hudson Soft wasn't really putting in their best effort here. These last stages are a nightmare and ramp up the challenge to a ridiculous level. Any platforming segments go on for an unbearable amount of time. Even the sections where you're on solid ground complicate things by putting you on narrow paths between obstacles, so you have almost no room to dodge enemies. One particular enemy type did its best to ruin my day. Tiny skeletons which shot single projectiles. You could shoot them, making them collapse into a heap of bones, but the little bastards would just keep shooting at you, and if you came into contact with their apparently lifeless bodies, they'd still hurt you. With no way to shoot behind you, any enemy you fail to kill will just keep shooting at you from behind for a time. What fun! Also, these final stages have no checkpoints, so if you die, you go back to the start. Again, each of these shorter stages ends in a boss fight, which repeat the ones you've seen before. There's one last awful desert stage, which is full of timed spouting fire, quicksand, and more enemies than I knew what to do with. There's practically nowhere to maneuver at this point, and unless you somehow manage to not take any hits and keep your most powerful weapon, it's next to impossible to clear a safe path through. And then you reach the final boss. After fighting a giant cobra, a tyrannosaurus, the final boss is a big fly. Sure, why not? On all the previous bosses, there was a little calm before the storm when you reached the entrance to the boss room. A second where there were no enemies and usually a power-up or two to grab before going in. For this final one, there's just a big "fuck you, try to make it to the door in one piece." So I ended up going at the final boss with just my rocks. After all this nonsense, can you guess what you're rewarded with? The worst kind of NES ending. It just loops back to stage 1. Congratulations, you just made it through this piece of shit game. Now do it again. There are a few more power-ups I haven't mentioned, which are ostensibly supposed to help make things easier. A star will clear any enemies around you. Helpful, sure, but they often spawn in bad places. There's also a bird which will let Riki fly. If you hold down the jump button, he hovers over the ground, still able to shoot, but not able to pick up items. This could make the platforming sections much easier, but if you get hit at all or stop holding the jump button, you lose the wings. Also, they're a hidden power-up. You need to shoot the right place on screen to make them appear. There's nothing to indicate where they are, and I think I saw maybe 2 of these while I played. The last upgrade that apparently exists is Macho Riki. This makes you bigger and lets you throw copies of yourself. I say it apparently exists because I never saw this power-up in my entire playthrough. Alright, what else is there aside from the awful gameplay? The soundtrack is fine. It's very Hudson soft. As I said, there's really only 3 environments, and none of them are that great looking. Some of the bosses look alright, I do love me some dinosaurs, but I honestly got really tired of watching Riki die. Look at this googly-eyed asshole. Playing through Adventures of Dino Riki kind of ruined my day. I was angrily messaging friends, threatening to take a hammer to this cartridge, and I might have done it if this label wasn't so nice and clean. But this is one of the most frustrating, least fun NES games I've ever played. Do yourself a favor, don't play this. If you want to see a much better Hudson Soft game, check out my review of Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu. Or, if you'd rather see me unimpressed, check out Zexies. I have a Patreon if you want to support my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.